Hello everyone, I'm Simon Bembo, Learning Manager for Springboard, and I'd like to share with you the highlights from a recent webinar hosted by Springboard. The webinar discusses how UK retail destinations and high streets have been impacted first throughout the pandemic and then since the lifting of all restrictions, as well as how destinations have adapted. What follows is a highlights reel from the webinar, which I'll then follow up with details on how you can view the entire thing should you wish to.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar today. I'm Jenny, Head of Marketing at Springboard. We're going to be taking a closer look at how retail destinations and high streets have fared throughout the pandemic and the lessons they've learnt during this period. Di is our insights guru. We're also joined by Lisa Carlson, who is the CEO for Canterbury BID, Stuart Mitchell from River REIT, and finally Peter Grant from Boots UK.
2020 was the strangest year we ever thought possible. Footfall dropped by 82%. Prior to 2020, the towns and cities that performed better were the bigger towns and cities, our regional cities. In 2020, the situation reversed. Footfall in market towns did drop, of course it dropped, but it dropped by less than it did in regional cities. The second trend was retail parks and the resilience of retail parks. Most retail parks have a large food store on them, and we all had to shop for food. And so retail parks retained far more footfall than high streets or shopping centres. And the third trend was online spending. At the end of 2019, it was just below 20%. At the end of 2020, it averaged nearly 28%. So big growth in online. This year started, footfall was much lower. It was 2/3 lower than in 2019. But it did creep up over that period of lockdown. There was what we saw, a pent-up demand. Yes, there have been dips, but there's also been peaks. At the end of a week or so ago, we finished at 17.3% below 2019. So a real improvement. And you can see with high streets and shopping centres in blue and purple, they follow a broadly similar pattern. Retail parks, similar pattern to some degree, but much stronger. The last complete week finished just 4% below 2019. And some weeks have actually been above 2019. You can see the market towns, for the most part, have been ahead of regional cities. It's quite heartening to see that footfall in market towns hasn't fallen away as we suspected it might do. And part of this is undoubtedly due to the hybrid working that a lot of us are doing. And looking at the impact of working at home brings us to central and outer London. And from week 30 onwards, the gap has narrowed from 19% down in outer London to 36% down in central London, whereas it was much, much larger at the beginning of the year. And looking at back to the office in a little bit more detail, what we've done at Springboard is create a back to the office benchmark, which comprises all those locations which are close to where offices are located in central London. So in the last 4 weeks, over in central London as a whole, footfall's declined by an average of 0.5% week on week, whereas our back to the office benchmark has actually risen by an average of 3.4%. What I'm going to do now is look at some other key indicators. So turning firstly to the vacancy rate. At the end of the last survey, which was in July, vacancy rate was 11.8%, which is virtually as high as it was as we came out of the recession in 2013. Around half of all consumers that we surveyed feel actually either very or completely comfortable about visiting retail destinations. And our September survey was the second survey that we carried out. Our first was in August. And you can see there's been a very slight diminution in confidence, but nothing too significant. 2/3 of all UK consumers shop in smaller shopping centres or high streets as much as they did before COVID, and perhaps more. Interestingly, half of everyone who works from home said there's been absolutely no change in their shopping habits. They're continuing to shop in the way they did, which is very positive for retail destinations. But at the same time, 24% said they're visiting destinations less frequently. And what are the prospects for Christmas trading? Well, but there are a whole host of influences on that and what may drive Christmas trading performance.
Thanks, Di. Really great insights. Stuart, welcome to the session. I'd love to talk to you about how your assets have fared throughout the pandemic.
28% of our retailers were classified as essential retailers. It wasn't surprising that throughout the pandemic, many of our assets' footfall trended much more positively than the national average, which peaked out at around about minus 82%. The most common feedback we're getting from our retailers is the need to remove the barriers for consumers, to make the decision as easy as possible for them to ultimately come to our town centres.
Peter, thanks for joining us. We'd love to talk to you about what Boots have done as a retailer and the different initiatives you've adopted, because you've obviously got stores in high streets, retail parks and shopping centres.
And a lot of what Di has said already, it won't surprise you to hear, has impacted Boots in a very similar sort of way. Di asked me a question about the initiatives that we have in place, I think, and whether or not some of these were planned, unplanned, accelerated and all the rest of it. Well, I can say that yes, all of the above.
Before we head into the next section, we're just going to run another quick poll around the issues facing high streets and retail destinations. Online shopping seems to be taking the lead. And of course, as expected, the stock shortages that have been reported as well.
The uncertainty is such a significant factor because of cash flow. So many businesses are carrying a significant debt burden. And this Christmas period, in terms of really just making as much money as possible and the cash flow, crunch, we need it to be a good Christmas.
Peter, let's start with you. Are you seeing more consumers return to store now, and has the return to office impacted footfall on your stores?
So in short, yes and yes. We're not expecting, because Di tells us these things, any huge surge in footfall in the coming weeks. So if you want to know what's going on in most bricks and mortar retailers, then look to Di for what's happening with footfall, because it's usually very reflective of that.
Lisa, how's Canterbury fared since the lifting of all restrictions?
I would say it's both, and I know we're still in a fragile recovery period for all the factors that Di outlines in her presentation. We have 35,000 students who've just descended upon us in the last week, 10,000 of whom are freshers, but actually they probably all feel like freshers because they didn't get to do it last year. So that's a really significant boost to our evening and nighttime economy.
Moving into the final section of our webinar topics today, and we're going to close with Christmas.
So for the first year ever, we're running a citywide television campaign alongside everything else. Well, and the idea really is constantly giving people a reason to come in and spend time and spend money, and as everyone's been saying, to really make it fun.
Christmas will be different this year. It won't just be different, it'll be better than it was last year. It won't be the same as 2019, but then every Christmas is different. Every year I've worked in this industry, the Christmas has been different. We know that a lot of our digital comms actually work in driving people into store. That's a really important insight that we've discovered in the last year or 18 months or so. You advertise on Google and it drives a lot of demand in store. So it isn't one or the other. And as a retailer, you have to have an omni-channel offer that includes the way in which you speak to your customers. And everything I've seen for this year, it looks really quite amazing. So watch this space.
We are going to be starting Christmas earlier this year. We're going to be setting up around about 2 weeks earlier than usual.
So we are out of time, and thank you so much for all the questions that have been sent through. Thanks for joining, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
If those highlights there have whetted your appetite for more, then the full 1 hour 20-minute webinar is available for viewing on our website for free. Go to spring-board.info, click resources, then webinars, then on demand. Alternatively, you can go directly to www.spring-board.info/webinars/on-demand. When you get to this page, you'll see the latest webinar along with any other historic webinars that might also be of interest for you. Thank you for your time. I hope you found some useful information in these highlights. I would encourage you to go and look and view the full webinar and the others that are available. Until next time.